Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You are here with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker. And today I'm doing a MacCready, Lamplight, or Mare deck from the Fallout Commander decks. This is the last video I'm doing for Fallout right now, and this is the best video, or the one I'm most excited about, because MacCready offers some very cool playstyles that you don't necessarily get to play in these colors. So let's start out by looking at MacCready. So MacCready Lamplight Mare is a white and a black legendary creature human advisor with whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, it gains Skulk until end of turn. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater attacks you, its controller loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So we have very defined and powerful ways to build this deck. 1, we're going to be attacking with small creatures, and 2, we're going to be gaining life when our opponents attack us, or, being able to double those effects or deal more damage to them when they attack us. So MacCready is very cool, and I love Orzhov decks. They're so much fun, and there's just so many cool cards with power 2 or less that just are great. So let's start out by looking at some of those cards where damage equals value. We want to hit our opponents because it's going to mean that we get some good value off of it. And 3 great cards that are, I think, staples in any MacCready deck is Graveblade Marauder, Raving Dead, and Virtus the Vile. All of these cards do one thing. Actually 2. They all have Death Touch, which is interesting. But they also half our opponent's life total, which is incredible. So Graveblade Marauder says when Graveblade Marauder deals combat damage to a player, that player loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So maybe not all of them do that, but the next 2 do. Sorry, I got confused. Raving Dead is a creature zombie with Death Touch. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose an opponent at random. Raving Dead attacks that player this combat if able. When Raving Dead deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half his life or her life, rounded down. In Virtus the Vile says Death Touch, and whenever Virtus the Vile deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life, rounded up. Very powerful cards. Graveblade Marauder is going to be good the longer in the game you go. You're going to have more stuff enter your graveyard, and you're going to be dealing a ton of damage as well. But the other 3 cards I want to call out from this section are Angel of Destiny, Blinding Angel, and Frodo Sauron's Bane. All of these provide another kind of value that I think is powerful. Angel of Destiny is 3 white creature angel cleric with flying and double strike. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each gain that much life. Very interesting, but at the beginning of your end step, if you have at least 15 life, more than your starting life total, each player Angel of Destiny attack this turn loses the game. This is an alternate win con in a bunch of decks that have you gain a ton of life, and it's very strong here. Not being able to block it is going to mean that we just gain a ton of life for our opponents, and it's going to be very good. Blinding Angel, 3 white creature angel with flying. Whenever Blinding Angel deals combat damage to a player, that player skips his or her next combat phase. Just keep them from attacking you. In a Kingmaker kind of deck, this is perfect. It's one of these kind of unknown cards. It's got a little bit of a value, but you don't see it too often, but this is the perfect deck for it. And then Frodo Sauron's Bane is a single white mana legendary creature halfling citizen with white black. If Frodo Sauron's Bane is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with base power and toughness 2/3 and lifelink. And then black. If Frodo is a scout, it becomes a halfling rogue with whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted you 4 or more times this game, otherwise the ring tempts you. So this one isn't as fast as a death as some of the other cards are, but you can probably just kill your opponents like this, and it's going to be amazing. Some of the other damage for value cards are Commissioner, Savrina Rain, Dawning Pursuit, Harnessed, Sunborn, and Teza Opulent Oligarch. So next, I'm going to be talking about cards that deal with the life gain aspect of this deck. You gaining life and you dealing damage to your opponent. But before I do so, I want to say if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. It would mean the world to me, so thank you. So the first 3 cards I want to talk about are going to be using life as a resource and also using life loss effects to deal a ton of damage. So Bloodletter of Aclazots, Revenge of Ravens, Skrelv's Hive are next. Bloodletter of Aclazots, one of the coolest cards from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, but says if an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. This unfortunately is going to trigger MacCready's second ability, but it is going to have it so when we attack with all of our little creatures, we're going to be dealing basically double damage. which is not something that you get to do in black or white very often without, the use of red. So this is a very cool card that's going to help us accelerate how fast we can kill our opponents with all of our creatures. Revenge of Ravens is an enchantment that says whenever a creature attacks you or planeswalkers you control, that creature's controller loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And Skrelv's Hive enchantment, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. It is corrupted as long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. Creatures you control with Toxic have lifelink. So these little creatures are perfect in this deck because we can either use them to block, not these ones, but we also have Bitter Blossom in here, or they're all going to get Skulk, and if our opponent doesn't have enough little things, they're not going to be able to block these, and we potentially could poison counter out an opponent, which is actually pretty powerful. So next up, we have some additional cards in this Life is Power category with Denly Streetwise Lookout, Ink Shield, and Atomic Wielder of Law. So Denly Streetwise Lookout, one of the coolest cards and getting up there in price from the Murder at Karlov Manor set. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. So this just adds on to the effect of Skulk and basically says, well, these creatures could have been blocked, not anymore. And additionally, and probably more powerful here, if an ability of a creature control with power 2 or less triggers, that triggers an additional time. So we have basically every creature we have in this deck triggering additional times, including MacCready. So if we have players attacking us with creatures with power 4 or greater, we get to gain 4 life and they lose 4 life, which is kind of going to stop some people in their track until they can figure out how to deal with this card. Ink Shield is next, and it's just a staple card. Instant prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. For each 1 damage prevented this way, create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. We can kind of just on the crackback deal a ton of damage, and again, Skulk is going to be super powerful in this deck. It's going to help us so none of these can be blocked by bigger things. And Atomic Wielder of Law, 1 white and a black creature, human advisor, affinity for planeswalkers, meaning it costs 1 less for each planeswalker you control, but it has flying and vigilance, and whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life and you draw a card. Another great way for us to gain some value off our opponents attacking us. But some of these other cards where we're going to use life or gain life in powerful ways are Anguished Unmaking, Ayara, First of Lochthwain, Bitter Blossom, Blood Reckoning, Campaign of Vengeance, Foul-Tongued Shriek, Hissing Miasma, Kambal, Council of Allocation, Lortho Corrupt Sheriff, Marchesa's Decree, Norn's Annex, Rock's Faithmender, Roaming Throne, Soul Warden, Soul's Attendant, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose. So lastly, like always, we have the good stuff category, and there's a couple cards I want to talk about that just didn't fit in those other 2 categories that I think are very powerful and going to help you accelerate or stop your opponents in their tracks. So first off, we have Buried Steward of Argive, Meekstone, and the Battle of Baywater. Buried Steward of Argive is a legendary creature human soldier with vigilance, and creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. This is a sick card. I didn't realize that this was a card. Obviously in this deck, we also have Ghostly Prison and Windborne Muse, all those other effects. But this is just another one to stack on top of it. Meekstone, a very powerful card, especially in this deck, because creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap step. Hey, guess what? You can attack us, but not again. So Meekstone is going to kind of put a threat on the board because players are going to have to hit into you in order to kill you so that their stuff untaps. But in the process, maybe you can outwit them and win the game. And Battle of Baywater, one of the many board wipes in this deck that targets all of our opponent's big stuff but leaves our little stuff alone. Destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater, then create a food token for each creature you control. Notably, another way to gain a ton of life. So some of the other cards I want to include are cards that are going to give you some advantage, whether that's mana or card draw. So we have Cryptghast, Skullclamp, and Welcoming Vampire. These are pretty much all staples in these colors. Cryptghast has Extort, meaning that when we cast a spell, you can pay 1 or a black to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt. And then whenever you tap a swamp for mana, add an additional black. Just a great way to help us ramp in these colors. But Skullclamp, one of the best known equipment ever, and it's back up to like $12, which is insane. But equipped creature gets +1/-1 whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. This is going to kind of negate the effect of some of our skulking abilities, but guess what? Now that they're bigger, they can be blocked, and maybe your opponents will block them and you'll draw some cards. And then Welcoming Vampire, whenever 1 or more other creatures with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under control, control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Basically everything in our deck that's a creature has power 2 or less, so we're going to be drawing a ton of cards off of this. But the other cool cards in the good stuff category here are Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, Arcane Signet, Ashnod's Altar, Burnished Heart, Call of the Coppercoats, Canotech Wraith, Charismatic Conqueror, Dusk and Dawn, Expel the Interlopers, Flawless Maneuver, Generous Gift, Ghostly Prison, Grand Abolisher, Infested Fleshcutter, Path to Exile, Recruiter of the Guard, Soul Ring, Solar Tide, Solemn Simulacrum, Swiftfoot Boots, Swords of Plowshares, Teferi's Protection, Victimize, and Windborn Muse. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you found some cards that are going to help inspire you in this deck. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you think? I think that this is the best out of the 4 decks I built. I think it's just incredibly strong. 3 Dogs is kind of up there. The other 2 were kind of just interesting builds in general, but I think MacCready is going to be a strong commander and one that you're not going to expect to have to deal with. So let me know in the comments down below what cards you would cut, include, or what you think about my list in general. Also, if you would please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing this video with a friend, that would mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Final Death. The underworld erodes memory, identity, and eventually the physical form, leaving only crumbling statues called Misera, hollow monuments to mortal futility. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.